Hi, welcome to the Diablo podcast. We are online at diabloincgamers.com. I'm your host, Flux. I'm joined on the show by Neinball
Guten Tag.
and by Aahz, or possibly Oz.
Hola.
Okay,
Hey,
it is Sunday and it is hot. This is the day after I returned from the big Blizzard trip that everyone's been oh so excited about. And there's not a whole lot of new information to share about the game, as I posted in the news post and drew out the predictable reactions. And I thought before I talked about what we were doing, the background of stuff. A lot of people I noticed were surprised when I first posted news about the trip. They're like, "Wow, aren't you guys blacklisted?" So I thought I would ask you guys, since you're not me and you probably don't know as many details about it. What did you know about the status of IncGamers and Blizzard PR over the last few years? Nineball.
Well, I know that there was a period of time when you guys were blacklisted and not invited to the fan events and but you were still in contact with the CMs, so you would still get information and such, but you wouldn't get invited to the fan site events. But then I also noticed, starting a couple months ago, that when they started linking stuff for like the anniversary, or I think even just like the patch zero point 0.7 coverage back in January and such, they were linking to IncGamers in a bunch of your articles. So whatever it is, I guess has been resolved since then.
Had you noticed? Is that about what you thought, Oz?
Yeah, that's similar. I mean, it seemed like maybe the relationship soured. I don't know exactly when, but and I don't want to speculate too much. I just know on that Jay Wilson blow up, there was what appeared to be some negative comments from Blizzard HQ, and then yeah, as the new CMs got more involved, it seemed like maybe an effort was made to repair that relationship. That's the only thing that I can say as an outsider.
If you don't want to speculate, we'll have to like, kick you off the podcast pretty soon. Kind of what we do here. So feel free to speculate from now on, okay?
Okay.
So we've written about this many times. I don't want to rehash it all here at this point, but I mean we were invited to BlizzCon '08 and '09, and Ellie and Paul were at the the world premiere of Diablo III back in whenever that was, June of '08, and we had a real good relationship with Blizzard PR at that point. And then suddenly, at some point in 2010, we just stopped hearing from anybody. And I talked to Bashiok right before BlizzCon that year and said, "Hey, we haven't heard anything. Are you going to invite me to BlizzCon?" And he's like, no." And I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, I can't really say. We'll let me get back to some other people." And so it was, he said it's nothing about what you're doing on the Diablo side. It's something about a larger issue with IncGamers apparently, but they would never actually say what it was, and they would never let us talk to anybody who was really in charge of stuff. It was always just community managers having to say, obviously saying what they'd been told to say, and who couldn't really tell us the whole story, which was kind of frustrating. But that was, what can you do, right?
Yeah, because
So we immediately changed our coverage entirely and started sucking up to Blizzard and only promoting the game, and that's why I'm Flux 180, as I'm sure you noticed.
that made me chuckle. That made me chuckle.
Yeah, okay, actually, we didn't do anything. We kept doing it as we'd always been doing it, as far as I know. And I mean, how many Bobby's Eyes jokes have we made, right? But
Yeah, I
and
mean,
so it,
you yourself, I mean, you've just been posting as you always have, just kind of
yeah,
how it is, and taking like the devil's advocate aspect on a lot of points.
yeah, and frankly, I'm a complete asshole about quite a few things to Blizzard, so I'm kind of amazed they ever turned us off the blacklist. But we didn't become negative and hateful, at least not any more so than we had been once they weren't inviting us to stuff. We just, we were kind of, our priority is to inform the fans and to share information. And, obviously it's kind of a quirky site, and I kind of post about stuff that I'm interested in. It's not, we don't have some whole agenda. If we did, we'd probably get paid better. But so anyway, they just, as you said, Nineball, you're pretty accurate. Right before last December, we heard from Lyleria once they had the new people, Lyleria and Vayflare and Grimiku were the new CMs, and they were all being much more positive and more interactive. And we just got an email saying, "Hey, can we get your mailing address? We want to send you a bunch of swag, and we're going to start talking to you about stuff again." So there's never been any explanation given what changed. I mean, we didn't change our coverage. Just I kind of assumed that just because so many Diablo 3 fan sites had dropped off, as there was obviously not that much positivity during the last year, that because we were one of the few left, they said, "Hey, we better, make up with these guys because we don't have a whole lot of cards in our deck anymore, right?"
Yeah, I was going to
Or
ask if
perhaps I'm
you're.
being cynical and it wasn't. They felt bad about it and regretted it. Who knows? So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say I was going to ask if your numbers went up as far as site hits, or maybe they went up relative to the other fan site hits or something.
Well, they'd always been higher than the vast majority of fan sites. I mean, we don't all share stats. Obviously, we're not having secret conferences and stuff, except for perhaps the one at the Marriott this weekend. But I mean, we'd had steady traffic, and obviously everyone's traffic's gone down since Diablo 3 launched. I mean, the game itself. I mean, you look at we used to have votes. They'd have 10,000 votes in a day, and now they have 2,000 votes in a week. So Obviously, we would like Diablo 3 to be more popular for our fans, for our website's traffic, but if all we did was post Blizzard's press releases and say how wonderful it is, we'd have nobody reading the site, So it's not, it's a business, but at the same time, it's more of a hobby and a passion.
True.
Anyway, this is not what I was meaning to talk about here, but it seemed kind of necessary before we got into this whole visit thing. And if it's, if we're on the, the white list now, or at least the gray list, who knows? But
No, I think it's interesting, and you could definitely, like, just from reading things, kind of see that, like, wow, something is something has happened, because it seemed like you guys were pretty tight in the Diablo 2 days. So I know it's a different team, I understand that, but
that was all Blizzard North. That's the
Yeah.
thing. We interacted directly with Blizzard North at all times, and the only interaction of Blizzard PR was basically to say you can't give this one site this much information. You have to share it with other sites, which meant that kind of nothing got shared at all.
gotcha.
Because for a lot of time there weren't really any other sites that were worth sharing with for much of the Diablo 2 period.
And probably too
Unlike
risky.
today, where there's thousands of really high quality fan sites, all of which I love and cherish and value.
Wah, wah, wah.
So anyway, they flew myself and four other people in for Diablo 3 this time, and they also had a bunch of people there the same day for Hearthstone and a bunch of people for World of Warcraft. And we were sort of in our three different groups. They're like, I don't know, maybe 18 or 15 people total. 3 of them were girls too, if you can believe that. None of the Diablo ones, of course, sadly.
Still, good progress.
Yeah, but two, Vayflare and Lylyria are both female.
Sure.
They're, I don't know, mid-20s or so, and Grimiku is about the same age. He's male. And there were 2 other CM types who no one really knows about because they're behind the scenes. They don't have, like, blue posts. So, no one would know their names if I said their names, so they remain anonymous. But they were with us all day and showed us around. We got there Friday morning early, and we had breakfast and had a big meeting, and they showed us around all day and gave us a tour and gave us some swag at the end of the day. So it was a good day. They're super friendly. They're really like positive. They're totally genuine. What can we do for you? We read your sites every day. We love. They specifically said a couple of times. We really like IncGamers. We like what you do. There was no hint of can you not make Bobby jokes or anything or. And we were talking about I mentioned after the breakfast meeting they mentioned the RMEH thing, and I was like people are like, oh, that's everything. They're very sarcastic. They're totally. All the Blizzard people are totally up on all the memes. And, RMAH ruined everything, FJ Wilson, that kind of stuff. They just joked about it. They're totally aware of all the stuff the fans say.
So wait, they're actually paying attention and seeing what the community is doing?
They are. They read every fan site every day, they say. They constantly send us emails about stuff we've done. So anyway, let's just go in order a little bit. But, so the first, okay, but before I do all that, I wanted to say a brief nutshell. So if anybody's listening to this and doesn't want all the details.
If you're listening to this but you don't want to hear the entire thing, go.
Yeah, now that we're 12 minutes into my babbling. Sorry, it's only 7 minutes, not that bad. Nutshell, there are not going to be any Diablo 3 content patches released before BlizzCon. They told us that about itemization, and people were like, there's nothing. They're not working on any patches right now. They'll obviously fix bugs if something comes up, but if you're hoping for some huge skill reboot or like, Infernal Machine Part 2, like next month, no. So if you are listening to this or perhaps participating in it and dying to say something right now, if I ever shut up, and your whole goal was more content, you should probably think about playing other games for a while this summer or doing other things and checking back in like November.
Or playing hardcore if you've never done it before.
Yeah, you're so on the take, Neinball. But that Bobby check must have just cleared.
I'm
huh?
just about
There we
back
go.
to Inferno and hardcore.
Okay, so you guys are both totally on the point. So yeah, I'm not totally dissatisfied with the game right now. I have lots of things I'd like to see fixed and improved, but
No, I'm
if your only purpose in Diablo 3 right now is hoping for patches and changes, you're going to be unhappy with this news.
No, I'm really honestly not all that surprised and not all that unhappy either. Like I got a guildmate that just came back, and he and I are running Ubers because he needed to get him a Hellfire ring. So I'm still finding plenty of stuff to do.
Okay, fact number 2, and then I'm going to get to the predictions, suppositions. Fact number 2, Blizzard is extremely interested in doing whatever they can with the community management and the community and the developers in terms of giving interviews, conversation, interaction, to do whatever they can to keep the community engaged and interested over the next few months.
And so
They said repeatedly they're really going to step up the info remails, the interviews, the interactions in the next few months especially.
this is all the information on the upcoming new content, right? Before BlizzCon?
That remains to be seen. They told me that I was going to be getting a developer interview quite soon for the podcast with Josh and probably with Wyatt at the same time. So, and I can ask whatever I want. So, who knows what they're going to say? But I had a huge list of, I had those two main page threads. and I got like, I don't know, 100 questions out of that. I had 7 pages printed out, sorted by type. I'm looking at them right now. Future items and economy, skills and characters, monsters, PvP, miscellaneous, and console were the topics I had. I had a page of each of those.
Yeah, I thought there
And
were
not,
a lot of good questions on those threads.
yeah, I didn't have 50 questions about everything, but I had, a full page for like items and economy, and other ones at least 8 or 10. And so I will get to ask those questions directly to the developers very soon, and we'll get answers and hear what they say. And they may just say, "Well, that's a good idea. We're working on that," or they may be more specific. We don't know yet. But none of that stuff, almost none of that, was able to be asked at the visit because that's not how the events were formatted.
No, I think that it's actually, a very nice change of what we're hearing from, Blizzard, because before, and was, a very large part of many of the early podcasts was just about how hard it was to get information from Blizzard on Diablo 3, and there was kind of this, stone wall that had been erected, and that they only released information when they saw fit, and there was very little interaction with the community. On the developer side of things, you wouldn't see Jay Wilson posting on the forums. We pretty much everything that we got was then piecemealed through the CMs themselves. But to actually see of this very big difference coming from Blizzard and just opening up communication, giving us direct access to the developers and such is, is one of the big things that the fans have been asking for ever since the game itself was released, and we were waiting through every single Diablo drought, for more information. But just being able to talk to them is going to be really nice. And I can also understand, doing something similar with World of Warcraft, because they lost a lot of that fan interaction with the release of MoP, and of course Hearthstone's not out yet, and StarCraft is probably their best team as far as doing that. So I'm not terribly surprised that there was no StarCraft team at this interaction, because their developers are posting on the forums all the time, interacting with fans and listening to their suggestions, and actually pushing out tests like every couple of weeks for the fans to go through and see whether they like the balance changes and such. So I can see that they're probably striving to be more like the StarCraft team is in their interaction with the community.
One of my questions is, how many of these developers are like the original ones that worked on it pre-release? Because one of my thoughts is, if they're maybe not ready to release things about the future, and maybe they are, and I'm just reading that wrong, but it might be interesting to hear about some of the things in the past, and well, here was the choice we made here, and this is why we did that, and here's an inside thing that we had this all lined up, and then we changed it, and went a different direction. Because it seems like there are some things in the game that would explain.
Okay, both the things you guys just said are points I wanted to touch on. I'll go the Diablo drought first, as you mentioned, Neinball. I actually used that term in the conversation. So first thing in the morning, we got there at 9 in the morning, and they took us into a room, all the Diablo people, after we signed our NDAs that nobody read. I'm probably a little much kidney at some point here. And took us into, we got our little passes, and took us into a private conference room, and that was with the 3 Diablo 3 community managers and 2 other people who are behind the scenes, community piece of support, and all of the fansite people, all the Diablo fansite people. And we had, there was some food, there were bagels and coffee and some fruit and stuff, and they sat us around this table, and we basically spent 2 hours talking about what we could do to make the community better, how we could make it work better, promotional events, how Blizzard could support us. And they just went to each person in turn and said, the first guy was a streamer who I didn't know, and they said, what can we do to support you more? What can we do to help you? What do your readers want? What do your, well, I guess viewers in his case, what do they want? What can we do? How can we interact with you better? How can we promote your stuff? That kind of thing. So really, this was all just, they hadn't said at this point yet that we're not going to get any new content or whatever. They said it pretty shortly afterwards, but I mean, basically, we're not going to get new content for 4 months. What can we do to keep the community engaged, And they're willing to, and he was like, he had a bunch of ideas, and then when it came to me, I mentioned that one thing we've always seen are these Diablo droughts, where they'll do 20 interviews in a week, and then we get nothing for 6 months, And we even saw that recently. We Anniversary Day, where we had Wyatt and Travis did those that talked to the streamer, and we basically had nothing since then. That's been what, month and a half or something now, 2 months at this point almost. And they were like, yeah, we want to quit doing that, but as I said, you guys do this kind of thing because, especially during development, because you want to get on PC Gamer and Wired and all these other sort of general gaming sites. Whereas the fan sites cover everything, and you want to do a whole bunch of interviews at once, so you get like a media blitz. And they're like, yes, that's exactly why we do it. And I mentioned the annoyance of how they had like 20 interviews come out on like May 14th of last year, where no fans even bothered to look at them because the game was coming out. And they're like, yeah, well, that wasn't for the fans. That was for general audience to make them aware the game is coming out. So that's just kind of how PR works. But when they're not pushing something big and new and exciting, which I don't think they're going to be doing until November, hint, hint. But that's why they really want to work with the community more. And they've really said we're going to be doing a lot more interviews and a lot more outreach in the immediate future, and we're going to try to avoid having Diablo droughts. Except, of course, that these droughts are going to be droughts if all you want is new stuff in the game.
So there'll be discussions of like what direction that they're looking for, some ideas that they have in the development, but nothing actually concrete or new content itself coming out.
We're not going to see content in the game. They
Yeah.
may very well give us new. This is going to be in the game in 6 months information. I can't speak to that at all. And I mean, literally,
Well, yeah.
I probably might be within a week or two. I'll find out because that seems like it seems like I am the next one up to get a interview, and they're going to be on the podcast. So
Yeah.
I can ask that very question.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's like we'll get communication from them of what they have plans of doing, but we won't actually see any of that implemented in the game until after BlizzCon or whatever.
Yeah,
Can I be on that podcast?
maybe.
Yes.
We'll see what the payola looks like. Well, you're going to BlizzCon anyway, so you'll see it yourself. And I had a point that you just talked about Oz, and I forgot what it was. What was your last?
I was talking about what did they do in the development? Did they change
yeah,
directions?
archives.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big thing. They mentioned the whole Wyatt Chang. His postmortem's going to be released pretty soon. The one he did at the GDC a couple months ago. And I talked about how they have this really cool information, all this content, and we never get to see it. Like, you'll see a panel at BlizzCon, and they'll show a bunch of slides of like how the skill system was, But they never really say, here's what this skill system was. Like, remember there was one like a hexagon and something?
Yeah.
And like all the skills, it was like, what would this have worked like? I would love to hear a little more detail about that. And they were like, yeah, that's a good point. We have all this. I don't know if you guys have seen the behind the scenes of DVD from the Diablo III CE. You can look on YouTube and see it if you want to. But I was really hoping it would be like, here's an hour with Jay Wilson talking about why the health system evolved or something like that. And it's not at all like that. It's sort of a fluffy bunch of interviews and shows like the guys, blowing things up and recording sound effects.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an
the
interesting
sound
view, but
one, yeah.
it's not at all the kind of detailed information I was hoping for. And they said they have lots of these archives of stuff. Oh, and Lyleria mentioned that she had worked with Wyatt some on the rough draft of his GDC presentation. And apparently he talks a lot about the health system, how it evolved in that. And he's like, no one really cares about this, right? She's like, no, they do. The fans really want to know how you guys decided how much life leech and how much regeneration and how much health globes should drop and all this kind of stuff and how you came to this system. And I was like, good job. That's why you're the community manager, because that's something that I'm really interested in. And like you were just saying, Oz, I think there's a lot of really good background information. I'd love to see how they evolved like the monster, modifiers and properties, and how they rejected some and others that didn't get in, and they just have a great deal of really interesting content for people who are into the game that doesn't involve new content that would really be interesting to read and learn about. And they just have to find a way to devote some time to producing that. And it seems like they're very open to doing that, so maybe we'll see some of that as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome seeing like some of the the monster types that they just dropped or they never did. Because I remember like one of the old ones that they discussed, pre-beta was the Die Together, where they all had to be killed at once before any of them died. Just some. Oh, what are the other things that they came up with, to develop? Or like one of the big things that I would like to know is that we got to see a lot of the pre-work that they had done on the Demon Hunter, and like the evolution of the Demon Hunter in one of the BlizzCon panels about how it was kind of like a half demon hybrid melee type character, but then they had to scrap the entire idea because we wanted a range class and we were going too far of making him kind of like the druid from Diablo 2. What progressions were like that for the other classes? Were there? What was how did that instability resource work for the wizard that they had talked about a lot, pre-beta and such before they, went with the arcane power? Those are a lot of the things that I would love to see of the different resource systems and just class mechanics that they had developed before we got the final product.
Yeah, that's pretty much what the conversation was. I actually mentioned the Demon Hunter. I mentioned fan art especially. I mean, concept art.
Mm-hmm.
And like we got like the Demon Hunter, exactly what you just said, and also the way he was an archer and kind of a desert archer, like a ranger.
Yeah.
And we actually got those concept arts released via one of the artist's personal blogs. It wasn't actually through Blizzard. I mean, that's all okayed by Blizzard if they do it that way. But I said, why don't we get that for the nun and the barbarian and all the other classes?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, why? Christian Lichtner it's all his fault. We need to send him angry emails. He's the head of the art department, and they're very protective of these early ideas, and they're very perfectionistic about their art, and they only want to release stuff that's really good. And they think that really reflects the class as it turned out, and they don't want to give us all this. Here's our rough sketches. We just threw it out. It's not meant for public consumption, whatever. I think it's really sort of a sense of professionality. They only want to show like polished work. But of course, we want to see the rough drafts.
Yeah, and
So
I mean their rough drafts are amazing, or at least what looks like concept art and rough drafts that they've put forth, and a lot of the early concept art that they showed on Diablo3.com, like the little line drawings that they had of the fanatics and like the morphed, the half demon fanatics and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff was really cool. I'd love to see what more they had of it.
and they said that Christian is getting a little more give on that. They're sort of wearing him down apparently. So hopefully we'll start to get some of that stuff. And also I talked to Vayflare, who kind of does all their fan art stuff, and she said she really likes that and loves that we have a really big fan art gallery, and they hope to promote more of that stuff. And they would like maybe like sponsored contests or thematic stuff, like when they did the female monk. You'll recall when they had the preview. It's like, what do you think it's going to look like? And like Bashiok was sort of promoting the best fan visions of what she might be.
Yeah.
They're really interested in more in that kind of stuff. Basically anything they can involve the community with and do that directly. So I'm going to see if I can get Vayflare to interface some with Holy Knight, and he'll freak out over that because he's a total Blizz fanboy. And maybe he can be like, ooh, I can help with fan art stuff and be official and things, and we'll see how that goes. But anyway, my two predictions, that these are my summations based on what I saw there and other information I've seen, and they should not be taken as official renderings of Blizzard, etc. Prediction number one, Diablo III expansion is definitely targeted for BlizzCon, and that's why we haven't seen a new patch in D3 for a while, and we're not going to see one in a while, because everybody is crunching getting the expansion done to premiere it at BlizzCon in November. And thus, putting anybody working on patches would kind of be, just treading water, sort of. I mean, it'd be nice if they hired like a couple of fan people who could basically make an official mod for 2 months and give us something new to play with. But they don't want to spoil the thunder of what they're going to have in D3X. They don't want to do anything now that will change the direction, because it's going to be totally changed in the official product, etc. And that could be wrong, and I may be wrong on the time scale, but I've not done the time scale, but I'm pretty sure that's what they're going for now.
If they go that route, it's not going to be on a PTR. It'll just be a release, probably.
No, it'll just be the announcement. But I think that's the general summation of the community, is that we're going to have, the expansion officially announced at BlizzCon. So that seems like a pretty good summation.
And prediction number two relates to that. The itemization patch is going to incorporate and or preview a lot of the D3X item changes. And that's why they can't give us much detail about it, and that's why they're definitely not going to rush to release it before D3X premieres. Because if it's going to incorporate, I don't know, imbues or the Mystic or big changes to how uniques work, etc., they're not going to give that away when it's going to be part of the big D3X preview. And so after we get D3X, then they can really start to show us some of the itemization stuff and make some of the changes that are going to kind of lead towards the new direction of items in the expansion. You're both stunned with the revelation.
Well, think about any sense on. I know we're just kind of guessing at this point, but if it's going to be like, okay, you can keep your characters, but you lose all your items because all the expansion items are going to change the system so much. We didn't want to keep anything, from the old legacy game.
I have no idea, but I would be shocked if they totally changed it.
Yeah.
I think we'll just get new stuff that's much better, and it'll basically obsolete what you have.
Yeah,
And they might have major game feature changes. I mean, everyone sort of speculates they're going to redo the attribute system. And if they totally revalue and devalue stats, then your plus 250 strength weapon is no longer going to be really mean what it does.
Mm-hmm. They could also go the route of taking attributes completely off of certain items, where some items like your rings, amulets, or even going as far as like gloves or bracers or whatever won't have main attributes, but the other stats on them will be so much higher that you'll want to upgrade them anyways, just to kind of reduce or change the direction that inflation goes. But I think that part of it about not having the itemization patch until after BlizzCon, this is not to hark on it too much, but is probably has a lot to do with the console release, that coming out in September, because the console version is going to have part of this new itemization system in it, of where fewer items are dropping, but they're going to be a better quality. So I wouldn't be surprised if they also put in some of those newer other itemization changes they might have planned for that itemization patch. And so their focus is on coding it for the console first, getting that done and ready to ship, and then porting that over to the PC, while at the same time working on the expansion.
Yes.
There we go.
The console is pretty much it's pretty much done. It's not gold yet, but it's going to be gold very soon.
Okay.
And the features are pretty much locked in. Well, I guess we might as well talk about the console now. I get to play test that for an hour. So it was the PAX East demo that we played. It was unavailable. I asked about playing Paragon characters, whatever, and those were not available. So however
what level were they?
So
it was like Act
they
2,
were
right?
you were 34 to start, and you were in Act 1.
Oh, okay.
So you basically started right after you exit the spider caves when you kind of go into the southern highlands there. And it was, it's the same game. I mean, there's a few changes. One of the funny changes they talked about a lot was the wither moths, the giant butterflies you seldom see in Act 1,
Yes.
but occasionally. And I forget which developer exactly it was at lunch, but he's saying, yeah, and we took those and we doubled them all. And, there's much laughter. And so basically, you don't see them very often, and they're big, and hardly anyone even notices them. So they just totally cranked their damage and their capabilities. So you don't see them much, and when you do, you'll notice it. So that's kind of the play changes they made in the console. They're kind of like made little nibbles here and there, and things that are kind of underutilized and buffed them up a little. I did get to try out the roll feature, which everyone is curious about.
Mm-hmm.
So the overall controls on the console, I mean, I haven't played a console regularly in years, so a lot of my observations are, I'm sure, quite noobish, and people who are used to it will be used to it. But it's really weird to control without a cursor, especially doing items and stuff. I mean, I keep wanting to hover on my skills. So you see all your little skill icons, but if I was playing classes, I don't play that much, and they had pre-made builds, and there were skills I didn't actually know what the icons were. And I'm like, what is that icon? And there's no way to move a cursor down to hover on the tooltip. And obviously, if you're playing it yourself, you've selected the skills and put them there in the first place, so you know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But just leaping in, it's really weird. It felt like like driving a car with your feet or something in some ways. Like the controls are still there, you just don't quite know how to operate them properly yet. Mm-hmm. So like you pick up gear, and we were playing. They had like 15 PlayStation 3s in a room, all around the outside. And so we were playing. You could play 2 on a machine. They had 2 controls for each one. And I was playing with one of the other Diablo guys. And it's fun playing with 2 people on the same screen, and it stretches quite a bit, but there's a lot of interesting things. If someone gets too far from where the person running is and doesn't move, it will warp you to catch up.
Okay.
So you just pop up and appear next to them, which is kind of funny if it happens right when you get to a boss. We were running down into Leoric's Manor, that's sort of the outside courtyard down the steps.
Yeah.
And right when I got to a Waller Molten, it warped him to catch up to me. He's like, whoa! That was kind of fun. And it's ninja looting if you're on the same machine. Ooh. You do not get custom drops. So if you're on the same they call it couch rules.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can ninja loot, but it's the person sitting right next to you in real life.
So they're going to punch you.
Yeah, if you're online multiplayer, it's the same as it is in the game right now. You see your own drops only. But if you're on the same screen together, it's first come, first grab. And the X key is your main attack, is your left click essentially, and also, is the ground picker upper. So whenever you get near an item, a little pop-up says hit X to pick this up. And so what happens whenever you kill a boss is X, 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 X. You both just start stabbing X furiously to get whatever appears. And then you look at your inventory to see what it was. And so it's kind of funny the ninja looting is actually kind of fun when it's a person right next to you.
Yeah, that'll add an interesting aspect. Does it still drop the same number of items for 2 people? Or, how does that work?
It's hard to say because we're level 34 and the density, it's in Nightmare. So, I mean, I haven't played a 2-player game in Nightmare, an MP0 in memory.
Understandable.
So I found one unique legendary. I found Gold Wrap actually, the belt, and it had buff stats for what it has now. But it's hard to say a level. I didn't memorize the stats, and I haven't gone to see what a Gold Wrap has exactly at this point. So as we know, the uniques scale up and down depending on the level you find them at.
Gotcha.
So I'm not exactly sure what a level 35 Gold Wrap is, but it had double gold. It had gold and magic find, and it had faster movement, and I believe it had faster attack as well. So, and the faster movement made an immediate difference because then I could outrun the other player I was in the game with, and that's when we started, discovering that if he just stood still, it would warp him to catch up with me, kind of thing.
Ninja looting's actually more efficient because you can just, if it's a good item, you can just dupe it at the end of your session, right? And you both get it.
Yeah, we asked about that. How isn't duping going to be totally easy to do? And they said, well, it's not that easy to do because apparently there's some security measures in the PlayStation and the Xbox, like it checks the date of your save or something, and it won't let you restore an older character that easily. But they said, yeah, people will figure out how to do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. You'll figure out, workarounds. I have 0 experience with these consoles, so I can't say exactly how that works. But they said it's not like the totally easiest thing in the world, like just backing up a file, but it can be done. So yes, there will be duping in some extent.
And
But they didn't seem like it was a real major, like it wasn't like part of their economic balance system.
gotcha. They acknowledge that it's going to happen, and but there's no auction house. There's no real money
Yeah.
auction house, so there's not really a terrible concern for it.
And I asked the lead console person, who was a young Asian woman. I did not know. She's not been in the coverage. It wasn't Josh, obviously, who was heading up this stuff, and another couple of the CMs I asked, how much have you guys tested the economy? Because as we all know with Diablo 3's release, there were some issues with the economy the first, 8 or 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have an auction house now. And she said, we've played it 1 through 60 many, many times in QA, and then we've played many people going in Paragon levels up to like 50. Just to see what the drop rate is, and we think it's good. We think you'll find enough good gear to enjoy it and get the feeling of progression all along. And they've done a lot of trading as well. But it's really, I mean, they thought that they didn't really test out Diablo 3 in that way before launch. They just took everything and doubled it, as we know, infamously. So I mean, I'm sure they're open to making some tweaks in terms of how these things work. But the fact that you can dupe whatever you want and trade with your friends pretty easily and stuff, I think they're kind of figuring fans will sort of find ways to enhance their income if need be.
Yeah, people that will want to do it, because I mean, there's also, even in D3 now, there's a little niche community of self-found, so it won't really impact them whatsoever, because they're going to have fun doing that in the console version if they decide to play the console version.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a much smaller niche in the future of Diablo. We'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
But the roll thing, people are all curious about that, and the controls. So you have the 4 thumb pad buttons on the right side. I don't even know what they are. Triangle, circle, square, and X, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are all skills, and you have a skill on your left trigger. Was it left thumb? God, I forget. Yeah, left. Yeah, there's 2 triggers on consoles now. It took me a while to realize that.
Yeah.
I'm so
L1,
and
L2, and then R1,
yeah,
R2.
L1 is potion drink. And I was like, how do I drink a potion? And they're like, it's the trigger on the left. I'm like, I'm hitting the trigger on the left. Nothing's happening. And they say, oh, it's the other trigger. So you can see my console expertise. They said people at PAX were dying like proverbial dogs in a proverbial street because they didn't know how to drink potions or how to play it. And none of us were dying, or very seldom. They're like, yeah, it's obvious when people actually know how to play the game, what a difference it makes. So it was not a super... I thought it was easier than I expected it to be. I was playing very recklessly and just kind of running through stuff. And I never died at all. And I thought I probably should have a couple times, but... I haven't played Nightmare on MP0 in memory, so I really can't even compare to what it was like. But it was fun. It's very fast action. It feels very natural with a melee character because you run up and just hit stuff. It felt really weird. I played a Demon Hunter first, and it feels really weird to have to be moving and then shooting the direction you're moving. So you have to constantly run and then turn and shoot back the way you were doing it. And I'm not used to the controls. And there is a button that makes you stand still, like the shift key. But I kept not using that, and suddenly I'm running back towards things and I'm shooting it, that kind of thing. And I'm used to right-clicking to use skills, and you have to use your right thumb on this, and which ones you use matter. And the other thing is people ask a lot about is how you have to control ranged attacks. And it's easy if it's just a projectile. But I was playing a barbarian using leap, and if you just do leap normally, I think it was the square button they had it set to, you leap about, I don't know, maybe 30 yards or so. Half a screen. It's hard to say what half a screen is because the screen stretches in width depending on how far the other person is from you.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes in the direction you're facing about X distance. However, and that's the same for Meteor and Blizzard and other sorts of targeted things. However, there is another button, I think it was L2, that will hard lock a specific target.
Huh.
And if you do that, you will target them directly, assuming they're in range, and you can which can be closer or further away, depending on what skill you're using. I mean, if you try to use leap at something right next to you, you'll just jump over it unless you hard lock on it, in which case you'll jump basically straight up in the air and come right down on it. And this, I was not able to do that very effectively, but that's because I only played it for half an hour and I don't play consoles. I mean, once people get used to it, it'll be no problem, I think.
And for that,
but you can't just shoot Meteor to some open space to your right 10 spaces. You have to turn
Okay.
and face the direction you want it to go.
All right, because I was wondering, it's like, so your only options are the preset distance for the skill itself, or the hard locking. You can't just like hard lock a location to try and preemptively drop a meteor where you're going to kite something through.
No. At least not that I saw any way to do or that we asked them about.
All right.
Because there's no cursor, so there's no way to...
Yeah.
I mean, Torchlight handled this. Some games have handled this where if you hold the button down longer, like your little reticle goes out further from you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they thought that just didn't work in D3. It's too fast-paced.
Gotcha. Well,
But
even just,
the roll makes a huge difference, though. You can really reposition with that console. You can do it anytime you want, in any direction you want. It goes about 10 yards. It's a little bit slower than a vault. It doesn't pass through enemies, but it does 1 point of damage. They added that in recently, so you can break barrels and stuff with it. And there was much joking about using that for an achievement to if you kill a boss with the roll kind of thing.
that would be an awesome achievement. They should do.
Yeah, they did add a few achievements in there, so
Mhm.
that's not something that's in the game yet, but they were all joking about that, how they should do that. And it was definitely fun to break barrels rolling through them, and you can knocked over walls and other destructibles and stuff.
What was the cooldown on it?
None.
Oh, no,
can
so
do it.
you just
You can do
keep
it
doing
constantly.
it. Okay.
No cooldown, no resource cost at all.
All right.
But you're not intangible when you do it, and you
Yeah,
don't pass through enemies.
yeah, you
So
still
you're just
think
kind of rolling at their feet,
Hmm.
much like the fan sites do with the community managers. So yeah, but it's really fun to use, and it's really good for positioning. Like you can roll. Like you can roll to the right while you're shooting left. So you'll roll, pop up, shoot a few times with a demon hunter or a wizard or something. Roll again, shoot, roll sideways. And so if you can roll left and change the roll is just tapping anything on the right thumbstick.
Hmm.
And the movement is with the left joystick, thumbstick, whatever they're called, thumbpad. And so you could say roll left, and while you were rolling, you could change the direction you were pointing with your left, and you would come out immediately facing the direction you want to be facing, which could be the direction you rolled or any other direction at all. So I could really see people could get very technical in their movement patterns and just roll, shoot, roll, shoot, roll, shoot, that kind of thing, which is a little quicker than actually running in that direction and then turning back around to shoot again, the way the console works.
Oh, this actually sounds pretty cool. That they've really fleshed this out to work for the console.
Yeah, it feels. I mean, it doesn't feel natural because I'm used to you doing it with a mouse, but I
Mhm.
think that people will have no problem with the controls and playing it. And once you get used to it, I think you can do pretty much whatever you want. And some things even better than the PC, since you have basically two control things at once instead of just the mouse.
You can actually control direction and movement with
Yeah, so I mean,
the two separate controls.
yeah, so it's fun. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't see any reason it won't work. I mean, obviously the itemization game is kind of the bigger question, and I can't really comment on that after half an hour of play. But
A half an hour of play on Nightmare.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, I found a couple of upgrades while I was playing, but I mean, you played BlizzCon demos, Neinball. How often do you stop to look at your equipment?
Um,
I mean, you've got 15 minutes to play, and you want to play.
yeah. Though I have to say, probably some of the earlier ones, not 2011, but I think it was like 2010, 2009. I would actually, the first time that I would play, I would actually, sit there and look at the character because I knew I'd have, the opportunity to play it again while I was at the convention. But I would sit and look, what does the gear look like? I think like some of the earlier ones, you actually couldn't even open up the character pane to see what your gear looked like. But just, looking at the skills, what they say, what they do, and such. I would actually spend some time sitting there and doing that.
Yeah, but once you were actually playing, were you like, oh, this item is a 1% upgrade on my shield, I better equip it right now,
Oh yeah, things like that.
At least
No.
for me, you don't stop for that when you're in a demo. You're just
No.
kind of rushing and going fast, and you want to see more cool stuff. And 1% higher numbers in a game that's not yet finalized is like, yeah. Although you wish you had later.
Did you get a chance to ask him about that low-level calamity in the screenshot that was not as good as the blue item, or?
No, just that all of the legendaries are scaled, and I think that probably what we see. I mean, we saw with all the bonus items they released, the bonus pre-order gear, and like a week later, it's like, oh, the stats were wrong. We have them updated stats to show you now. So I wouldn't really put too much into what we saw in that screenshot because it was probably from a demo from like 2 months ago.
Gotcha.
And hopefully they've done a better job balancing the items since then. But the patches and stuff is very complicated because you have to go through just the Xbox and the PlayStation people. And so they can't just put their own patch out in 2 minutes like they can on Battle.net. Obviously, it doesn't take 2 minutes, but
But it takes.
So in terms of what gets patched, it's a little more of a little more bureaucracy and overhead to deal with. But they said they were definitely open to patching and fixing things if things didn't work right for players. So I mean, if everybody's feedback is the legendaries suck because they're not enough stats, they're not going to just say sorry. They will make an effort to improve that.
That's good. Was there any plans or thoughts on DLC or how will they handle the expansion for the console?
They just said that's not. They're discussing it, but they're not going to tell us yet. So
Gotcha.
I mean, they have plans, but I don't know them. So
Yeah.
fun, which is often how it works.
I guess like the only other question that I had for the consoles is there any incentive whatsoever for a PC, someone that already has Diablo on the PC, to pick it up for the console besides just having it for the console?
Well, I think if it's just you playing in your house, probably not. I mean, a lot of people, the console is more of a social thing.
Mm-hmm.
So couch loot rules. If you have friends who don't have PCs or don't have PCs that can run Diablo 3, which is not uncommon. A lot of people have a PC who game, but they don't have a modern system, and they can't really play modern games. But do have consoles, and it's a little more fast-paced. It's more actiony. It's more kind of like a God of War kind of feel, where you're constantly in motion.
Yeah, because
The skill they said I had to test out immediately was Whirlwind, and that is so fun on the console because just wherever you move the stick, your character goes. It just feels more, it feels more interactive. Like it is really fun to run any direction you want to and just feel. I mean, it's kind of like just holding the left mouse button down and using the mouse to run. But somehow it's just a little more like you're driving the person, like you're running yourself, kind of, instead of watching something move.
So that'll be a reason for Flux to buy a console, so he'll actually play a barbarian.
Well, I played one in the past, but it's a mistake that we try to overlook these days.
My 6-year-old just, for the first time, asked for a console for Christmas. So it's possible that, I might base that buying decision on what Diablo 3 is available for. Just for
We'll see.
Whatever you would call it, novelty of it.
Yeah, well, Bobby's got another toilet that needs gold plating, so you can help out with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I know people that are going through and getting it, just for that, that social aspect, because it is, like, I think, what is it? I can't remember the game that they constantly were comparing it to, but I think it was like Gauntlet Legends and such. Just a hack and slash game that everyone can sit down and play on a single screen and such. And there aren't that many big console titles nowadays that have co-op, on the same console. You actually have to, be in your respective houses, on your individual system in order to play co-op with a friend.
And I got that feeling. I've played Gauntlet Legends a little bit. I played Gauntlet and Gauntlet 2 tons back in like the 80s in arcades. I was a big arcade gamer back in the day, 90s even, whenever they were. And it's very much that whole, Red Elf is eating all the food lately kind of feeling. Or the ninja looting and the XXX. It's like, hey, I got all the items. Hey, I got all the items. Of course, if, eventually your inventory's gonna be full and you can't continue ninja looting, and you're picking up all kinds of white and blue junk at the same time. But I could definitely see ninja looting being a lot of fun with people on your own couch, especially if you're all drunk a little bit.
When you open your inventory, you have to drink for however many white items are in there that you drop.
Yeah, exactly.
First person that has to go back to town.
And once they're back in town, you can but you have to go back to town together. So that's the whole thing. If someone's getting too greedy and wanting to go back to town, it's like, no.
Is that
you'll have to run along with us and pick up nothing because you were greedy. So
is it just like whoever's system it is, they create the game and then they're the quote-unquote guide and they're the ones that get teleported to? Yeah,
player one has the ultimate authority, I think. And when we were experimenting with that, like opening up inventories and stuff, and if somebody else opened up their inventory, everything freezes on the same machine, and they're looking at their inventory, and you're just kind of waiting while they look. So you don't want to spend too much time, digging through the menus because all your friends are sitting there watching you and heckling you. So it's definitely a different sort of aspect socially. And again, this is all just if you're on the same machine. If you're playing it multiplayer online, it works just like the PC does in this case. It doesn't pause, and they're still playing, and you're standing there like an idiot. So
yeah, it sounds like it has some potential.
And I mentioned Hearthstone, which I've been using as a punchline. Actually, very fun. I have not played any Magic the Gathering type games other than like a little bit of it like 10 years ago. So I'm sure everything I thought was novel and interesting is probably old school for people who actually do it. But there's like it's all the WoW characters. There's like I think there were 9 different classes.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many there are in WoW.
Like
shamans and priests and paladin and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's the 9 original classes that WoW shipped with.
And so what you do is you get a deck of cards, and you get 4 cards to start with. They have actual, apparently, real life cards you can buy. The beta test at this point is friends and family, so all the Blizzard people can play it from their computers, and they have friends and family who are doing so as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a public beta yet, though it's going to start pretty soon, apparently. And you get, you play head-to-head, and the other person has cards and you have cards. And if you do a lot of playing, or you can actually buy additional decks and get better cards, which I guess is kind of how they lure you in, right?
Yeah, it's the free-to-play model. You can either play to earn it, or you can just pay to have the rewards right away.
And you get your cards, and you do, you get 4 to start with, and you can reject any ones you want, and then you get some random ones. And, you try to get cards out, and you kill the other cards. All the cards have, like a hit point. You have a life and an armor, and when you hit something, you have a damage and a life. And when you hit something, you'd be like your starting cards are like 1, 2, 1 damage, 2 life. And when you hit something, you do 1 damage. But whenever you hit something, you take as much damage as they have life. So you want to get so early on you want to get like a 6/7 out there if possible, and then all the other guys, little dudes, will hit it and just destroy themselves in the process. And there's really the game. So I played I don't know, I played 3 or 4 games against the AI computer and won I think all but the first one, which is pretty easy really. But they're going to make it smarter. They said there'll be more options for it. And then you play other people who are all Blizzard employees in the in-house, and they know what they're doing, and they've bought cards and decks because they've been playing a bunch. The community managers told us that they keep wiping and restarting all the time. He hasn't played it much because they keep wiping it. And once they stop doing wiping, get a little more firm, he's going to get in there. And as you play, you earn when you have wins, you earn a ranking sort of thing, like I guess like a head-to-head player rating. And as that goes up, you earn new decks, or you can just buy them, I guess, directly. So people who've been playing it a bunch had really good decks, and of course knew what they were doing. And every game would start off, we'd be even for like the first 5 or 6 plays. You get 1 more diamond of mana each turn, up to 10. And that enables you, cards have different costs from like 1 to 6 or 8 was the highest I saw. And they do cool stuff. And the ones that are really powerful, you'll put out a card and it's like, it's like +1 damage, +1 life to all of your minions on the field. Or +3 attack to all your minions, that kind of stuff. So what I would always happen, we'd be kind of even, and then the other guy would bust out a couple of cards that was like, +2 life to all minions, +2 attack to all minions, and suddenly I would just get stomped off the face of the earth. But it was fun. I mean, I never played it at all, so I was making every noob mistake possible. But I mean, I would definitely take part in the beta to some extent and play it a little bit. I wouldn't like devote hundreds of hours of my life to it, as you would have to do to get really good at it and buy all the decks and stuff. But I could definitely see if they had a matchmaking system where you weren't always up against experts. It could be a lot of fun to play it.
Yeah.
Either of you guys do Magic the Gathering type stuff?
Oh yeah, I used to play a lot of Magic the Gathering back in the day, so it's I've got a lot of interest for Hearthstone when it's coming out. I think the head CM for Hearthstone was actually the monk cosplayer.
Yeah, I saw her.
Yeah.
She was not in her monk costume, oddly enough.
I would think that would be her uniform that she had to wear to work every day.
Yeah, sadly not true.
I used to play Magic, even got the computer game, but since I haven't played WoW, I don't know that I'll have any interest in picking that one up.
Well, I don't play WoW at all, and it wasn't a problem. I mean, you don't know the lore of the characters or whatever, but I mean, it's all very self-evident what the moves are, and you kind of get the sense of, shamans have like a bunch of minions, and like the paladin, all your characters have a special move. You can spend 2 of your mana diamonds on each turn to do whatever. And the paladin summons another, like a really low-level minion for every turn, and like I think it was a shaman. Maybe it was some orc with tusks. If it wasn't a shaman, it was a
warrior
priest or something. No, it wasn't a warrior. It was definitely a priest or a shaman, some kind of magic user. I was thinking it was like a witch doctor, basically, kind of thing.
Well, then that would be the warlock.
Yeah, that's probably it. And they could summon a new random minion each turn, which is pretty cool. That was stomping me whenever it got used against me. They always get some really good minion. And like the mage has a direct attack. You can shoot right at anything each turn for like I think 3 damage. So you'll have a special different ability, and all your cards are different. And I can just see infinite numbers of strategies opening up in this game. And all the Blizzard people are really positive about it and really enjoying it. And I think people will probably like it a lot, even if they don't play Magic or WoW like myself.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy it, but I can definitely see it being a big popularity for things who do.
Yeah, and I mean, well, it itself, it's going to be free to play, so you don't actually have to put any money into it whatsoever to just get it and play. And they'll have the versus AI that will scale with your level, and then we'll have the matchmaking system to try and put you up against people with similar experience, or at least decks and such.
Well, as you can see, Neinball knows much more about it than I do, so. I'm not pretending when I say I know nothing about it going in, but I still thought it was pretty cool. So, I thought it was actually going to be I didn't even know it was a video game. I thought it was actually just cards on a table.
Oh yeah, no,
it's showing the degree to which I've kept up with it.
Yeah, it's 100% digital. It's believe that they're calling it. It's a CCG, a collectible card game, because they're not going to allow trading. That's the one thing you won't be able to do. But they'll have systems where if you have multiples of a card that you don't want, you can you can basically destroy those copies of the cards, and you get dust from it. That you can then take that dust in order to craft cards of varying rarities and power.
Did you know any of this stuff, Aahz?
I did not.
Okay, so good. I'm not the only one who knew nothing about this. So anyway,
I was
obviously
listening
your expert on this.
I know I've heard the term Hearthstone. I hope they explain it before they ask me a question, because I didn't know what it was at all.
That's what Google's for while you're not talking.
Oh, that's a good point.
Flux is giving his story. You're just sitting there.
Oh, Hearthstone! Oh, man!
There you go.
And then you can pose as an expert.
Yeah. Exactly. Works for me. I mean.
So, a couple of other things that we talked about at the. So we had lunch after we did this whole talk. Then we went and did a Diablo console for a little while, and then we met in another conference room for lunch. And when we got there, they had ordered a bunch of stuff from CPK, California Pizza Kitchen, and they had pizzas and pasta and salads and stuff. And there were 3 or 4. Josh was in there at the time. Wyatt was already in there, and a couple of other Diablo developers. And we all came in, the community managers, and then more Diablo developers came in, and Kevin Martins was there eventually, and 4 or 5 other guys. I can't remember everyone, but like 8 or 9 of the senior Diablo 3 developer people. I mean, pretty much the entire. If a grenade went off there, the game would be over, basically, right? Like they say at the Academy Awards every year, and unfortunately never happens. But anyway, so we talked about all this stuff, and we had lunch, and so basically during lunch, all the Blizzard guys are just talking about every other video game in the world that they're playing lately. I mean, these guys are like so hardcore gaming. I've been around Blizzard employees on like a social occasion, a fair number of times over the last 50 years or so, and they're always totally wildly into every other video game available. None of which were ARPGs at this point. They were all talking about like there was a whole discussion about the new Tomb Raider game, if it's a real game or if it's like a movie of like torture snuff porn of yourself. Because there's so many horrible ways you can die. People were like, I don't like playing it. They were talking about EVE Online for a while, and someone had just started up that recently and saying I'm playing this. Apparently, everyone in the gaming industry, it's a very common thing to play EVE Online on a second machine while you're working because nothing happens for like 18 hours at a time. Like you have to fly across the entire like scale model of the solar system to like find some asteroid to dig rocks out of, and you just sort of do that on another machine at a time, and like literally like 10 other games. So the whole lunch conversation is all these Blizzard guys just like heckling each other about what games they're playing lately and what they like and what they don't like and who's sick of this and can I borrow this from you, and just these guys are like way into gaming, much more so than me, as it should be obvious by now. But if anybody wonders if they're actually gamers, yes, they're either that or they're very good at playing the part.
No, I think that's good. That way they can get exposed to a lot of the ideas that other people are doing and incorporate that into whatever they're actually working on.
Anyway, eventually that ended, and we got lunch finished and said, okay, now we're doing this Diablo III Open House thing. And Josh moved over to the table, and everyone got organized in new chairs a little bit. They had really nice chairs in this room, big conference table that had maybe 16 people around it or so. So there were a bunch of people still on couches and chairs, kind of around the outside of the room. And Josh says he's like, I have this whole list of questions that I want to ask you guys, and we're just going to discuss some stuff, but probably we're not going to get very far. And we got through one question in like 45 minutes. So. As I mentioned in the little update I did today, and his question was, it wasn't discreetly asked, but basically it was, what's the best single thing we can do to improve the game? What's not in the game now that you guys wish was in the game? And the streamer guy answered first and said bottomless dungeons. And so we had this whole conversation for like 10 minutes about the pros and cons about that, and how, I mean, if you guys read the transcripts or saw the live streams, they kind of talked about that on those. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what is the root issue of that? What does that really mean? And it's like, well, it's that you want to keep playing in the same game and not just redoing the same content over and over again. You guys want different layouts, you want different dungeons, you want different varieties of monsters, not just Alcazar runs over and over, or the zombie punching grounds we have in Act 1 now. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, we understand that, and we're really working on that for the future. And that's, I think, what we're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff in the expansion. But they're just not available yet, and they can't really give us any details on it yet.
Well, that makes sense, because if we envision this world where, okay, Paragon 100 Wizard with 250k DPS goes into the expansion and then gets even better, does that mean they're going to go to MP20? Because you're going to have some kind of content to challenge people still, and bottomless dungeon would be a way of addressing that, I would think.
And they didn't actually say the words, we're going to have a bottomless dungeon, but obviously they were very, very open to the idea of larger. I think if you listened, one of the things that Travis said on that stream was, if his example was, okay, it's Friday night, you've got 5 hours to play, what can you do in Diablo 3? And I want to give you something to play that is other than just doing the same run 25 times. I want larger projects, larger goals, something that you can actually devote a bunch of hours to and experience more than you can in 10 minutes of the same content. And I don't know if that means bottomless dungeons or maybe just very large dungeons, or some sort of, like he said, Infernal Machine is sort of a good start on that because it gives you something to do other than just the same monsters over and over again. Mm-hmm. But running keys is a very simplistic thing that doesn't last forever. So I think that they're definitely working towards adding some larger features, maybe even stuff that incorporates multiple players as a mandatory feature or not, like guild kind of events or raids. Yeah. I don't know. That's not a quote in any way, but I just think they're aware that people want more to do than just the same dungeons over and over again.
And that sounds good. I mean, a key run is a really nice thing. If you have a half hour, you can go get, one, maybe two. So having something that would take a longer term, that also makes a lot of sense.
Or one of the things that they could do, if they wanted to make a change to the current, key running system or add in another similar event to it is, how it worked in Diablo 2 is in Diablo 2, of course, you could go between the acts. So if you wanted to, you could go through and, attempt to get, the key from the Countess, the Summoner, and, Neelathok, what have you. So that way you could get all of your keys and, then you could, run that a couple of times so you have your full set to get into all three areas. But then instead of just opening up the portal and then fighting those bosses directly, it would actually open up a portal to a whole other dungeon that you would then have to go through in order to get the next piece to open up the portal to Uber Tristram, where you'd finally get the Hellfire Torch and such. If they could maybe make it a bit more like that, where instead of just you use your infernal machine, it opens up the portal, and then you fight the Siegebreaker and Zoltan Kuhl, that it opens up a portal and you go someplace to get something else before you actually go through and fight those bosses would be kind of interesting. It'd also be a way of them putting out they could put out different random dungeon tile sets and layouts that they hadn't used previously.
Yeah, that was actually something I was pushing before when they were talking about the monster density. I said they should make, bottomless or very large dungeons because you can change all the rules in those and have different layouts, different monsters, different combinations of monsters. It's not just more of the same thing. And I think that probably they had similar thoughts, but we're saving that for a later project and not just to sneak it in as V108. So if you can take a hint from that, that's my speculation anyway. Another thing that came up open world was definitely a topic that came up, and people saying they wanted to go between the whole game, and they wanted just different areas, different looks of areas, reshuffling the same content basically, and new monsters and new combinations, all that kind of stuff. And they were all like, yes, 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 which doesn't mean yes or no. It means we like the idea and we thought about it, and we're not going to commit to it yet. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out, they said this specifically, that when they say we've talked about X or we've discussed doing X or something, that doesn't mean they talked about it at the water cooler for 5 minutes. That means they've actually modeled it, they've put it into the game in some degree, they've done theory crafting on it. So if they tell us that we're talking about this or thinking about this, that is not a casual remark. That is, we have spent, umpteen man-hours actually evaluating this feature, pro or con.
That's good to know. That's a good insight.
That's definitely inspiring.
They said they need a better terminology because they said we've talked about it or we've thought about it, and it sounds like they just passed it in the hallway and said, "Hey, how about this?" No, but if they say that it means they've really given it thought and serious consideration, which doesn't mean it's going to happen, obviously. But
sure.
But it's much more of an it's had multiple people have devoted brain space to this concept, so I guess we can maybe underline that when we get something new. They say they talked about it in the future. And the other thing that came up that I brought up immediately is one of the things that was really fun in D2 were odd builds, underpowered builds, random builds, stuff that focused on just one odd skill. And to a great extent, that was enabled by the items in Diablo 2. And of course, there were a lot of knowing, grudging, head shaking. Yeah, we know. As they've mentioned many times with itemization, they want to make stuff. The one example they've said is like the Spear of 300 that gives a big bonus to the barbarian's weapon throw damage. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work because if you don't get a huge DPS, it's useless.
Yeah.
But that they've mentioned in the past that they want specific items that make skill X really, really good and are viable at least with this particular item, which enables a lot more different builds. And they said the problem now, to a large extent, is that we have an internet. And so you can't, a lot of people in Diablo 2, you would just sort of experiment with builds on your own, and if it worked, it worked, and if it didn't, it didn't. But you couldn't so easily go to some website and immediately call up the most popular skills in the game and get like an Excel file that would show you exactly how many % below optimal you would be using this build with this build with this build, And they say they can't put that genie back in the bottle, obviously. It's sort of destroying the entire internet, which I think is probably on their long-term goals. But they just, you can't you can't force players to play builds that are less effective by telling them it'll be more fun. Mm-hmm. People want the most efficient whatever. So I said, people really would like there to be more than 2 viable wizard builds. And they all laughed and said, we're just happy there's not 1 viable wizard build. So they can try to make a bunch of things that are roughly the same and roughly equivalent, but fans will almost always, they say, fans are like water. They follow the path of least resistance to profit. So, whatever people can do and succeed with, they'll do it, even if it's totally boring, and then they'll complain that it's boring that they only have one build. Well, there's 100 builds, just people want to do the one that's the most efficient.
They've had some success in that. I mean, I'm using Cloud of Bats on my Witch Doctor, and I see a lot of other people using that in public games. I mean, that one didn't really exist before 1.08. So I think they have had some good ideas around that. Was there any?
I thought they were actually a little too hard on themselves when they were saying this, honestly. So I'm like, yeah, there are, I mean, there are, like you're saying, I mean, I think someone actually mentioned the Witch Doctor. There's actually a fair number of viable builds.
Yes, definitely.
I think a lot of their viable thoughts are like, what can people do on MP10 with the best quality gear in the world? And if you get that specialized, then there is only one build per class.
Right.
And well, there's actually only 4 builds because you can't play a Demon Hunter at that level anyway. But if you're just doing MP1 or MP2 with 80k or 100k DPS, there's a lot of builds.
Differentiating things between like Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 in that respect is, Diablo 2, the monsters were pretty easy to kill, in hell mode, relatively compared to what they are in Diablo 3. You could go, completely self-found, go into hell. You might have some hard times, but you could go through it. And it kind of became of, well, how quickly can I kill it, instead of, it's like, well, what's the highest monster power that I can get to with, my gear and my build. And that's just kind of like that stark difference of, how easily do you want to kill these things in Diablo 2 versus, how effective I need to be in order to actually play on monster power 10, is kind of what made that difference of not needing a super optimized build. You could go around and just have fun hitting things as a bear sorceress in Diablo 2. Wasn't terribly effective in going and clearing through, but it was something fun that you could do, and you'd one shot mobs. But whereas the other sorceress builds, you shoot out a frozen orb and kill everything on the screen and such. So it was just kind of different ways that the game is designed that kind of hinders some of those oddball builds that you might otherwise be able to do in D3.
And a lot of that now is just that there's so much more interaction and communication. I mean, you couldn't look at every character build in the world on a website in Diablo 2 and see which one was the best,
Yeah.
And there wasn't an auction house, so it was much easier to be ignorant of how lame your character was and still have fun in D2. I think is kind of what it boils down to. And in D3, we're all so aware of what everyone else is doing and how powerful they could be. I mean, there weren't YouTube videos for D2, I mean, you can look at some guy killing, MP10 Osmodan in 18 seconds now, and you're like, well, WTF, I can't do that. This game sucks. And you never knew that in the old days. We had no idea if your character was good or bad or in between.
There were some good guys on Diablo II.net, though.
Yeah, I wrote a few of them. So I hope
there you go.
But there wasn't, I mean, especially the auction house, I think, is the same thing, because you can see what good gear is so quickly and easily, and if you can afford it or not. And it's just much easier to realize the overall interconnectedness of everything these days.
Yeah, but in D2C, if you were a poor player like me, you could get just about any legendary by gambling, or sorry, unique by gambling, before they finally, took the odds way down. So you could look at a build, and that would be part of the build is gamble belts until you get a gold wrap, or gamble boots until you get a goblin toe. So I don't know. I mean, yes, there were no videos, but there was still a lot of information available if you were a fan and sought it out.
Yeah, we did talk about the auction house a little bit in terms of, it's got pros and cons, and everyone loves it and everyone hates it at the same time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I mentioned how when it was down for 3 days, everybody who hated it was immediately totally pissed off after the patch came out and they had to turn it off. They're like, I can't play the game now, I can't progress anything, there's no auction house. It's like, weren't you 2 days ago saying it was the worst feature in the game and you hated it? It's like, well, that was when it wasn't online. So they didn't give us any hints at what they're going to do with the auction house long term, but like they pointed out that all the old crafting recipes before they added the new ones in 108, everyone says those suck. They only suck compared to the auction house. If you were actually playing self-found on your own,
they were pretty decent if you managed
to craft being able to make a 6-mod rare belt or whatever was a really good tool if you didn't have an auction house where you could go and buy 1,000 of those for 50k gold.
The only downside is, prior to 1.07, those things never dropped. Just the regular, yellow crafting recipes. And God, you're probably blessed if you ever found one of the actual, set or legendary patterns.
I've never found one.
Tomato. Just because you couldn't find it doesn't mean you couldn't use it. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I did. I found one legendary pattern in all my time playing. It was a Venom Husk, I think the bow, and I sold it for like 7 million.
I've still never found
I've
one.
never
A set
found.
or a
Yeah,
legendary craft.
Yeah,
never
I
found one.
realized that I'm incredibly lucky in that respect because there are people with like 3 Paragon level 100 characters and they've never seen a single one drop.
I've found every rare recipe multiple times and never found any of the unique ones or legendary ones. So obviously they don't like me.
Yeah.
But probably after this trip, I'll get I'll get the Blizzard employee plus 100 to magic find inherent buff. That the secret inherent buff that all characters get that only Blizzard people get. So that'll be awesome.
Oh, there
I
you
can
go.
zoom right up then. I should mention that's a joke. Probably someone will take that seriously. They play the same rules as we do as
What's
far
the
as we know.
single most important thing you're looking for to improve the game? Give the fan site operators 100% magic find and gold find.
Yeah. And I get the special visited Blizzard banner pattern now too. That was really
Nice.
nice. It's a giant gold toilet bowl with a pair of lips touching it. So that's a fantastic one.
This will
So,
probably be like the first time ever that you actually messed around with your banner.
Oh, of course. Well, it's once you enable that is when you get the 100% magic find gold find buff.
Oh, there
So
you
I
go.
have to.
Oh, they actually made a use for the banner. Awesome.
Yeah, and there's one that's got a female dog on a collar, and it lets you know that you're their bitch. So once you enable that, you get bonus points too. It's great that way. I love having sold out.
No, that's a good report. I'm glad that they brought some people in and got some feedback and did some good community relations. It sounds like.
I guess just to recap, if someone missed the start, I mean, we're not getting any new content in the next few months, but they're going to be doing a lot more community interactions. And I personally think that we're going to see D3X at BlizzCon in November and then get tons of cool new information from then on. And, at some point we'll get itemization patches as well, but not, it's going to be, if all you want is new game features this summer, you should probably gather new games. Or play hardcore, as Neinball suggested.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of playing the game. That's for certain. I'm glad to see that that Blizzard is making an effort to make sure that all of their franchises are interacting with the community, and really reaching out and being a lot more open in their discussion, because I think that's probably one of the biggest complaints across the board is they always kind of have there's always that kind of PR barrier between the developers and the fans that we weren't able to just freely communicate or see their ideas and things like that. So it's just nice to have a little bit more open communication, and that they're actually trying to make an effort to address direct concerns that the community has and such. So I mean, the kind of, even though we're not going to have any new content until BlizzCon, it makes you pretty hopeful for what they have stored in the future.
And we might get some really interesting information in these interviews coming up in the next few months. I mean, they may tip us off on all kinds of cool stuff. So I mean, it's not like we're going to learn nothing until November.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not going to see anything new in the game
Yeah,
until then.
exactly.
One thing I forgot to mention is that the last Friday of the month, it was a bad time for this because that is the day that all of their teams have like special meetings and really go over everything new they're working on. So we had this Diablo town hall from like, I don't know, 12:45 until like 1:45, and then every developer had to rush out and said, "Oh, we got to go to this big meeting." And Josh stayed for like 5 minutes longer to kind of wrap things up, but they all ran off to talk about what they've been working on currently. And obviously they're not working on patches currently. So the fact that every single Diablo 3 lead developer had to rush off to a very important meeting makes pretty obvious they're working on, important current things, and they couldn't be late for the meeting. So when we were all sitting outside waiting to leave afterwards at like 4:30, we were going over to Dave and Buster's for dinner. Like 100 people came out of another building across the way. We're all about that by that big orc statue. It was kind of in the central plaza area, sitting in tables in the shade because it was hot as hell because it was SoCal. And I mean, 150 people came out of a building, just this parade. I'm like, what are they all doing? And I was talking to one of the CMs, and he goes, "Oh, that's all the WoW team. They've been having their big monthly meeting." So they have to go to like the amphitheater in this other building or the cafeteria so they can get 150 people in one room and have this all face-to-face meeting at once. And that's what the Diablo team had been doing. Diablo team is Team 3 at Blizzard,
Mm-hmm.
and the WoW team is Team 1, and StarCraft is Team 2. And they have a Team 4 and 5, which are in secret locations that we don't know what they're doing anything. In theory, Jay Wilson is on one of those now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually saw the Team 4. They said, "Oh, here's Team 4 here behind this place, where we can't go into." And they didn't tour us through any of the Diablo 3 offices because, of course, the walls are probably covered with concept art of the Necromancer, whatever the hell they're doing in the expansion.
We can only hope.
So we got no eyes on at all of the Diablo 3 work area. We just had to stay in the main public areas. But yeah, so the last Friday of the month was kind of a bad time for the meeting in terms of them all being busy with other stuff. But at the same time, it's good they're busy with other stuff because we want other stuff.
Exactly.
So any last thoughts, Oz?
My typical one, just I still enjoying the game, like where it's at, and I'm having a blast. Still going through the current content, whether it's a little hardcore or working on Paragon or Uber runs.
Okay, this is Flux 180 signing off. Moo.
Moo.
For the Cheetos!
Okay, guys, thanks for your time. Moo.
Moo moo.